There is something to be said for a simple watch, one that doesn't need to stand out from the crowd in terms of looks or complications. In fact, the experience of ownership is uncomplicated. It's old reliable. A piece you can grab and go for pretty much any occasion. We'll be looking at one such watch today. It bears some similarities to another we've looked at on the channel before, but it improves upon some of the weaknesses of that one. Welcome to Addicted to Watches. Today, we're looking at yet another watch I picked up from Japan, and yet another radio wave solar watch. Many people look down on quartz movements as cheap and nasty, but there are still some high quality ones, and especially in Japan. Seiko's brightz line includes a lot of these. This is the Seiko SBTM159. In my first video on the channel, I was looking at the SAGZ083. It has a lot going for it, and I called it the best JDM watch that no one knows about. That said, it had a couple of weaknesses, and for me, this SBTM fixes most of those, but does have some of its own weaknesses too. Funnily enough, it uses the exact same quartz module inside. So, all of the differences between these two are cosmetic. But are the differences good enough to make me prefer this one? Let's take a closer look at the watch and find out. The place we usually start in these videos is the dial. Why? Because that's my favorite part. A watch can have all the specs in the world, but if the dial doesn't grab me, I probably won't want it. I won't be interested. The dial on this watch is interesting in how uninteresting it actually is. It's simple, but I wouldn't call it boring. It's a very practical dial. Because of the fact that it's solar, it has to be at least a little bit transparent to let the light through to the solar cell underneath. That means we don't exactly have a black dial here, but something closer to a dark grey mixed with purple. In the right lighting, you can actually see the horizontal and vertical lines bisecting the dial. It has a very flat, matte feel to it, and I actually really like that about this one. The shade of purple-grey can change quite subtly in different lights in a very pleasing way. Moving around the dial, we have applied silver hour markers that are nicely detailed. They are all rectangular, except for the trapezoidal 12 o'clock marker. They have polished bevels on the sides to catch and play with the light. It's almost impossible to see with the naked eye, but the tops of those markers are textured horizontally, which results in an almost rainbow color from arm's length as the light hits them. At 3, we have a thin applied frame surrounding the date complication with color-matched black date wheel. Also applied is the Seiko logo above the pinion, and under it, just like my SAGZ, we have printed 2 lines of text in white: radio wave control and solar. Surrounding the dial is an angled chapter ring in a slightly darker black color. While at first you might think that it doesn't look good with a mismatch of shades, I actually like how it gives a bit of contrast between the two. Around this, the minutes are marked, as well as some letters to indicate a couple of things about the movement. At the cardinal points, there are small dots of lume to give you a bit of legibility after dark, but they aren't particularly large or bright. There is also no way to visually orient the watch after dark, because the 12 looks exactly the same as the other 3 lume markers. On the left side of the dial, we have an L at 8 and a H at 10, which are used together to tell you the level of battery's current charge, high or low, or somewhere in between. On the other side, we have a Y at 2 and N at 4 to indicate a yes or no to whether the watch is receiving a radio signal to adjust the time. Not that you need to worry too much about that if you're not picking up a signal. The movement in this watch is the 7B24 solar movement, and has a rated accuracy to ± 15 seconds per month. In operation, you will likely find that it is more accurate than that though. If you do need to adjust the time, it doesn't set like a normal watch. Yes, you can pull the crown out to 2 positions, but you are using the pusher at 2 to change the time. Push it once to advance 1 minute. Hold it for 2 seconds to advance until you press it again. This means that if the watch is running slow, It's literally a push of the button to move the hands forward 1 minute. But if it's running fast, it can take a while for the hands to cycle through 23 hours and 59 odd minutes. Another thing that is nice to see about the movement is that the second hand hits all of the minute markers bang on as it goes around the dial. That's just another sign that this movement, although quartz, is still a high quality one. Another sign of high quality is a good crystal. Sapphire is preferred over hardlex, and AR coating is preferred over none. Thankfully, this watch has both, and that anti-reflective coating really does a good job giving you a clearer look at the dial. There are often times where the crystal disappears completely. It's completely flat and sits ever so slightly above the bezel. While we're talking about the bezel, let's have a look at the case. The case on this watch is a bit different to the one on my SAGZ. Where that one was very flat and angular, this is sleek and curved. It's a little bit thicker too, but I really don't mind that. After all, it's still miles thinner than most automatic watches. In terms of its sizing, I think it gets it just right for an everyday watch. Case diameter comes in at a very wearable 38.6mm, which puts it in a range to suit most wrist sizes. The other dimension that helps with that is the 45mm lug-to-lug, stopping it from hanging over the sides of smaller wrists. Thickness is not an issue with this watch at just 10mm, so it can easily slip under a cuff when you need it to. The width between those lugs is a standard 20mm, so finding alternative straps won't be an issue for this one. The case is honestly an underappreciated element of this watch in my opinion. I myself didn't give it too much thought for quite a while of owning it. It has many similarities to the Saab 035 and 033 case. As I mentioned, there is a bezel around the dial which is high polished. Also polished are the sides of the case and lugs. To break up all of that polish, the top surfaces of the lugs have been brushed. It's got those curved lugs that point down nicely, and it also has a step where the finishing transitions from brushed to polished and looks almost as if a thin extra layer of metal has been laid over the top of the lugs, just like the case on the Saab. It gives a bit more visual detail to the case, and if it's good enough for the Saab, it's good enough for this. One disappointment regarding the case is that the crown is unsigned. It does screw down however, which helps give it 100 meters of water resistance. Also on this side of the case are two pushers for changing the time and checking for a signal. One protrudes and the other is recessed into the case. The caseback itself is quite simple and completely high polished. It, like the crown, screws down. I'm not used to seeing an all polished caseback like this, but it does ensure that it feels smooth when on wrist. Moving on to the bracelet, we start to see a couple of weaknesses of this watch. Luckily, unlike the SAGZ, this bracelet is removable, so if you really don't like it, you can always swap it out for something different. It tapers from 20 at the case to 18mm at the clasp, and the first weakness we can see here is the hollow end links. Well, in my opinion it's kind of a plus, because my SAGZ doesn't have end links at all. The bracelet is integrated into the case, so I can't change the strap at all on that one, but for this one we can swap it to any other 20mm strap. In addition to the hollow end links, the rest of the links are unfortunately hollow too. It's not obvious at first, but from the side here we can see that as the light moves over them, a faint line running down the middle of each link where they have been folded together can be seen. Funnily enough, the first link as it leaves the case on each side, as well as those connected to the bracelet, are solid, to make sure they have enough strength to hold it all together, but all other links are folded. That said, the bracelet still feels quite solid, and I didn't even realize they were hollow until I looked at it very closely. One final weakness back here is the pressed clasp, which is unfortunately common on Seiko watches. However, it is at least signed with the Seiko logo and has a very thin profile, so it sits nicely under your wrist without getting in the way when you're wearing it. And so, we come to one of the other main points of difference between this watch and my SAGZ. Where the SAGZ is a slightly darker color due to its titanium construction, this watch is made of stainless steel. That means it's significantly heavier, and for some, that will be a minus, but for me, honestly it's a plus. Now of course, I don't want to have it weigh as much as some big chunky dive watch, but a bit of weight helps a watch to feel more solid and secure on wrist for me. where the SAGZ is light and comfortable to the point you can forget you're wearing it, this one feels more intentional. It still has the same grab-and-go versatility with the same radio wave solar movement, but feels more substantial. Having talked all about the case and bracelet in isolation, let's get it on my wrist and see how it wears, and see how it looks all together. I said the size was perfect for me for an everyday watch, and I think you can all see that now here. It's not going to draw unnecessary attention to itself. It looks appropriate, and with the refined case shape and simple design can suit any occasion. As I turn my wrist, that polished bezel catches the light nicely. But that's not your only option for this watch. I think it looks fantastic on this brown leather strap too, and if you are after a similar lightweight experience as the SAGZ, a leather strap will really help with that. Not that I would, but if you wanted to, you could even throw it on a NATO strap for the ultimate in comfort. So, while it shares a lot of the similarities with my SAGZ, this watch still manages to have quite a different feel to it, and that is mainly due to the change in materials. For me, that change fixes both the issues of weight and solidity, as well as giving me the ability to change out the stock bracelet if I want to. I probably won't very often, but it's still nice to be able to. What do you think about this watch? Do you prefer it to the SAGZ083? Is it too simple and too plain? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.